Who were Jesus's family members? Well, the most obvious would be Mary, his mother. Well, what about Joseph? Well, he's not supposed to have an earthly father, right? But our sources are a little bit confusing on this. We'll talk about his brothers and sisters in a minute here. But look first at what it says in Mark. It says, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and his brother, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Mark 6:3. Wow, he has sisters also, but we never hear about these. We don't know their names. But here we have a listing of 4 of his brothers. Let's look at what Matthew says. This is different. "Is not this the carpenter's son?" There, he's not supposed to have an earthly father, right? But Matthew sort of slips up here and says, "Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers called James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. So there we have it. He has a mother and father, Mary, Joseph. He has 4 brothers and sisters. We don't know how many sisters. We don't know their names. Why are the brothers and sisters marginalized in the New Testament that we don't hear really anything about them? Okay, let's look at what happens progressively as we go from the earliest gospel, Mark, to Matthew, to the later gospels written, Luke and John. In Mark, there's a little bit of a longer list. Okay, this is at his crucifixion. Mark, "There were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary his mother." There's a lot of Marys, okay? "And Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and of Salome." So Mark lists 3 brothers. Look at what happens in Matthew. They're slowly deleted. "Along whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee." So now we're down to 2 brothers. Okay, look at what Luke does. Luke deletes it further. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna. Who is Joanna? "And Mary, the mother of James, and the other women who with them who told these things to the apostles." So each gospel is slowly deleting one more name. What do you think happens in John? Are we down to 0 brothers mentioned? Well, John, just so happens, he doesn't mention the name of any brothers, but he does mention this mysterious disciple whom Jesus loves. We don't know if this is a brother or not, but let's look here. In John it says, "But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother," Mary, okay, "and his mother's sister." Who's that? Maybe, is that Joanna? We don't know. "Mary, the wife of Cleopas." Who is that? "And Mary Magdalene." How many Marys do we have in here? There's like at least 3 here. It's a lot of Marys. When Jesus is on the cross, okay? When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple whom he loved, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. Okay? Who is this mysterious disciple whom Jesus loved? And he says, "This is your mother." And to Mary, his mother, he says, "This is your son." Is that to be taken literally, that he is literally her son? If that's the case, if it's literally her son, it might have been James. It might have been Jesus' brother James. It might have been. But we just don't know that. Traditionally, the church would say that it was John, the Apostle John, would seem to be this mysterious disciple whom Jesus loved because he was one of the inner group of three, Peter, James, and John. There's a lot of Jameses and a lot of Johns, okay? So he was part of this inner group, and then at the Last Supper, he's reclining against Jesus' chest, like physically, leaning on him, reclining on him. So church tradition has it that was the Apostle John, but we just don't know. It remains a mystery. It might even be James, his brother James. Now, we've got that covered, okay? We've got the sisters. We don't know their names. We don't know how many. We've got the brothers. There's 4 brothers, and the names are listed. We've got his mother and father, so Mary, Joseph. This brother named James, this is really a big kind of mystery because we don't know anything about any of his brothers or sisters, but James bursts on the scene in the book of Acts. I mean, in the book of Acts, we're cruising along and we don't hear anything. We only hear about Peter. Peter gives some sermons. There's all this kind of stuff going on. There's miracles. And then you get to chapter 12, and this is the first time we hear, okay? Let's look here. And try not to get confused with all these Jameses, okay? The first James they mention here is actually James, one of the 12 apostles, who is killed. And then after that, we see mention of a different James. Let's find out the difference between these 2 Jameses. About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Acts 12, 1 and 2. James, the brother of John, these are the sons of Zebedee, the sons of lightning, okay, or thunder, something like that. So he was one of the 12 apostles. Herod had him killed right there in Acts 12. Later on, in the same chapter, there's a different James. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison, and he said, "Tell these things to James and his brothers." I think that is James and also the additional brothers of Jesus, his actual brothers. That's the first time that James is mentioned in the book of Acts. They say, "Go tell James." So if you're cruising along and you're reading the Bible, maybe you just skip right over that and don't think anything of it. But then you get to Acts chapter 12 and you're like, whoa, James is the head of the church. How did that happen? Because I thought it's supposed to be Peter. "Upon this rock I'll build my church," mentioned in Matthew. But we've got James, who looks like he's the leader and head of the Jerusalem church. Look at this. Acts chapter 12. After they all finished speaking, James said, "Brothers, listen to me. Simon has said this and this." Okay, let's skip down a little bit further. He goes over some prophecy. Then at the end of his little speech here, he says, "Therefore it is my judgment that we should not trouble the Gentiles. They don't need to follow the entire whole law of Moses. They don't need to be circumcised, but they just need to follow a few basic Noahide laws." James is giving a ruling. Now you might say, well, there were a lot of Jameses. How do we know that this was James, the brother of the Lord? Well, we have a source. Paul testifies. Okay, let's take a quick look at what Paul says about James. Okay, Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, he says he met James, the brother of the Lord, and Peter. He specifically says James, the brother of the Lord, is the one that he met. And also, he mentions James a second time in that letter of Galatians. So it looks as though Paul is confirming the leadership of James, okay, in his letter to the Galatians. So how did that all go down? How did that happen? Did they take a vote? How did he become the head of the church? And then he was head for about 30 years, from around the year 30ish to about the year 60ish. So that's 30 years, whereas Jesus' ministry was only 1 year, or if you stretch it out, it might be 3 years according to the Gospel of John. But if Jesus' ministry was only a year, 3 years, James was the head of the church for 30 years. And we don't know anything about it because he's marginalized in the New Testament. Because the gospel authors probably don't want us to know much about that. They want us to know a lot about Paul and Paul's gospel, but not really about the actual religion of Jesus and his brothers and his family. And that's the real key right there, okay? Jesus and his family, what did they actually believe and do and teach? And that's what we're trying to get at here with the historical studies. And I will about wrap it up with that for today. Please let me know what topics you're interested in related to Bible or apocryphal biblical text. Thanks.